1980. Two nations are engaged in a secret cyber battle. The public remains unaware. The USSR is building the Trans-Siberian Pipeline, but lacks the automation technologies to safely control the flow of natural gas. So the KGB decides to steal it. The CIA is happy to comply, and using a Russian double agent, codenamed Farewell, supplies the Soviets with malicious software, engineered to sabotage the pipeline's control systems. The pipeline is completed, and the software is installed. In April 1982, NORAD detects a massive explosion that rocks the Siberian wilderness. It's the largest non-nuclear explosion ever seen from space. A huge section of the pipeline is destroyed, and the flow of natural gas halted. The USSR loses billions of dollars in revenue, as well as control of the European energy markets. The US government makes no official statement. 3 years later, Agent Farewell was executed.
Unlike conventional weapons, cyber weapons don't come with a return address. You know, when somebody bombs you, you can look up and see what's painted on the tail of the bombers, and you know who it is. Cyber weapons aren't like that.
The greatest hurdle we have is that people don't believe that a bad attack could take place. And what that means is they may have to wait until one does.
In a silent fog, we've entered the realm of cyber warfare, where our enemies are as close as the nearest computer. And now the very digital networks that we've come to rely on have become weapons. Weaponized code is the new offensive strategy. These new armies with these new missiles will create new casualties. If you were making a list of the countries most vulnerable to a cyber attack, you'd probably put the small Baltic country of Estonia very near the top of the list. Estonia was the first country with online voting. It's a place where 97% of all banking takes place online. In fact, Estonia proclaims high-speed internet access to be a basic human right.
Since we were right at the beginning of the IT revolution, we went over at a very early stage in trying to put as much government services online as possible, and it allowed us to leapfrog a number of countries that you consider old and established and well developed, but in fact they're quite primitive compared to where we are today.
In 2007, the country faced a cyber attack that threatened to bring the government, banking, and media to a standstill. The breadth of this attack was unprecedented, but it also had its roots in Estonia's history. During World War II, the Soviets rolled into Estonia, defeating the Nazis and occupying the country.
If they were to get the Germans out, that would be fine, but they decided to stay, and this was not a very pleasant experience.
The Soviets sent hundreds of thousands of Russians to live in Estonia. Almost immediately, they erected a memorial in the center of the capital city to commemorate the Russians who had fallen while fighting the Nazis. To the transplanted Russians, this was a tribute of patriotism. To the native Estonians, it was a vulgar symbol of occupation and oppression. In 1991, the USSR fell and Estonia was free. But there were still hundreds of thousands of Russians who remained. In 2007, the Estonian government approved a plan to move the Soviet statue from the center of town to a nearby military cemetery. The announcement triggered increased resentment by the local Russians, and prompted by outsiders from Moscow, they began rioting.
There was hundreds and probably thousands of people there, police, streets were closed, fighting, riots, windows broken.
Обратите внимание, за мои деньги, за мои деньги.
On the morning of April 27th, Estonians woke to find that the bronze soldier was no longer there. In an attempt to quell the violence, the government had moved it in the middle of the night. At 9:42 on the same morning, something strange began to happen. Government websites began to freeze, and online banking access was blocked.
And then the cyber attacks took place. People looked for online news, and the news outlets were down. So you didn't get the news.
So you immediately feel that something is wrong. I mean, it was clear to everybody that something is wrong in a few seconds. So have you heard it already? Oh my God, what's going on?
Estonia was falling victim to a distributed denial of service attack. Somewhere, a network of rogue computers was targeting critical servers in Estonia, overloading them with so many requests that they failed. The rage brewing on the streets had transformed into a massively disruptive internet cyber attack.
So this was something that goes way beyond a conventional attack of a criminal.
The cyber attacks increased exponentially over the course of 2 weeks, starting at 1,000 packets of information per hour, and by May 9th, reaching 4 million packets per second. Estonia had effectively been cut off from the rest of the world. No news got out, there was limited banking, and lack of governmental services. All of this prompted by the removal of a statue.
Everyone knows that Russians are emotional. If Estonians hurt something that is sacred to us Russians, then we will not simply sit and watch. For example, if someone urinates over my mother's grave, then I will want to cut his throat. That is it. Tit for tat.
Если бы кто-то начал крошить могилу моей матери, да я бы зарезал сразу. Вот это просто то же самое.
И мы будем свято хранить память об этом. Свято хранить это историческое достояние. А те, кто сегодня пытаются принизить этот бесценный опыт, кто оскверняет памятники героям войны, оскорбляет собственный народ.
4 years later, it's still unclear who was responsible for the attacks against Estonia. But even if we did know, what could be done? What are the rules of cyber warfare?
All warfare has been kinetic up till now. I mean, if it's a bomb, it's kinetic. A tank shoots a shell, it's kinetic. If someone bombs you, you bomb them back. But this is non-kinetic. Well, let's take a cyber war. You don't know who did it. You could have a pretty good guess, but you have no proof. I mean, you really don't. I mean, to this day, we don't have any proof, actually, of who did this. So what do you do back? What's the appropriate response to that? The rules of conflict and warfare are different here.
And in this war, there is no soldiers, generals, and government. In a way, we are all soldiers in this war, because it will hit immediately all of us.
The attack on Estonia may have been a case of hackers acting independently, or more likely as a part of a loose network. There may have been state sponsorship, or maybe there wasn't. What's clear is that this was the first time the internet was used as a weapon to disrupt the workings of an entire nation. Click on an email for Viagra and your machine becomes infected. Open a photo attachment from someone who you think you know, and your machine becomes infected. Go to a website for victims of a natural disaster, and your machine becomes infected. If there's a way to exploit a vulnerability on your computer, someone has either done it already, or they're devising a way to do it in the future. Our networks are in a constant state of battle. Hackers using malicious software or malware are stealing passwords, accessing accounts, and infecting innocent machines. The front lines of this battle take place in rooms filled with analysts sifting through thousands of lines of code, attempting to protect users from malicious spam, worms, viruses, and botnets.
Right now we receive about 35,000 malware pieces a day. 6 years ago there was about 200 or 300 malware pieces a day.
In year 2010 there was a huge amount of malicious spam. Actually it was about 6.4%.
In the last years the complexity grows significantly. We can see rootkits are already common, bootkits, so complexity is growing.
One of the most insidious pieces of malware infects millions of machines worldwide, the botnet.
A botnet is an army. A single bot is just a robot. It's a small piece of code that may sit on a victim machine doing a repetitive task over and over again. Now, those bots are controlled by what's known as a bot master or a bot herder. So I can send my bot army a command that says send packets to a particular address. Becomes a denial of service attack. It could be a command to send emails out to a certain address, so I can use them for spamming.
We have a little bot farm. It's an infected machine, so we can monitor the activity of some spam bots. And we actually can see when these bots are active.
They sample, download something from the internet and executes it. It can add your machine to the so-called zombie botnet, so your machine will act in a criminal purposes. So by your machine the spam will be sent, you can be used to fraud your own friends.
A botnet was the tool used in the attack on Estonia in 2007. Hundreds of thousands of hijacked zombie machines were commanded to log on to the websites of banks, media outlets, and government. When the attacked websites couldn't handle the huge increase in traffic, they simply shut down and failed. Your computer, whether you know it or not, may have been one of the machines that attacked Estonia.
I think we live in a time when larger and larger numbers of individuals are connected. Well, if not well protected, these individuals will provide very, very inviting targets to hackers and other criminals. Now, perhaps the aim will simply be to make them slaves in a robot army or a bot net, or perhaps this could be something that fosters cover for terrorists. There's a whole range of possibilities. So the individual, it's in some respects not unlike the situation on the frontier in North America in the 18th century, when individuals largely had to provide their own security. Well, cyberspace is another wilderness. It's man-made, it's constantly growing, but it is a wilderness. It has great beauty, but also great danger. And if we go back to that frontier mentality, then we'll realize that the individual will be primarily responsible for his own security.
A Miami man and 2 unidentified computer hackers have been indicted for allegedly stealing at least 130 million credit and debit card numbers.
The internet has become a conduit for transporting malicious code, but in some ways, it's even better for stealing money.
Organized criminal groups have been able to steal billions of dollars a year through cybercrime.
It's a fascinating place. They have websites. You have to be known to get in, right? So you can't just go to this website yourself. And when you get in, it's a black market. And they have amazing tools for sale. Things that NSA could only do, say, 15 years ago, you can now buy on this black market.
You go to Google, right? And let's say I'm interested in credit card information, right? So it's as simple as first site on the list is a site that sells credit card dumps. Track 1 and track 2 with full CVV information. So it just comes down to this. In this day and age, being a Google ninja and knowing how to do searches on Google or Bing brings you to the information that you want. So you don't have to know how to write a bot. You don't have to know how to send out spam. All you have to do is know how to search Google to get the information to lead you to the right site.
Websites that teach how to steal passwords. Phishing sites that lure you in and then steal your identity. Criminals have as many ways to get you to do what they want you to do in the cyber world as they do in the physical world.
You know, you got to give the bad guys credit for that. They're pretty astute at picking up on what people search for and what they think people are going to search for, and then presetting sites so they're already there. You know, if the ground starts shaking and there's an earthquake or a fire, you know phishing sites are getting registered as it's happening. You know, it's like it's an automated script.
And you can see that too, like with the MTV Music Awards, when a couple years ago, they debuted the New Moon trailer. The very next day, New Moon JPEGs infected, New Moon this infected, New Moon that infected. I mean, because they knew that's where people were going.
Unlike the 90s, when you were infected with something, you knew you were infected. But now the threat landscape, it's over. The threat landscape now, it's all behind the scenes. And unless you're a technical person where you know what you're looking for, many people will continue on.
Never know it's there. It's absolutely like a chess game. They make a move, we make a move. We come out with a certain type of technology. They come out with a way to evade that technology. We tighten up the technology. They figure out a way to evade the new tightening.
Here is an instance of the ARPANET as it was recently configured, as you can see, with some 25 or 30 sites in it.
The internet was created by scientists working for DoD as a communications tool that would survive a nuclear war. And they didn't think about security or trust because survivability and the ability to connect was much more important.
And like most technologies developed for government use, the internet found its way into public hands.
Well, there's a revolution going on in rec rooms, offices, and classrooms around the world. A revolution in which 15 million people are taking part. They're sharing scientific data, arguing philosophy, or passing on cooking tips and gossip night and day through a computer network called Internet.
And then there was a big boom with Internet, and public got access to all these networks. It was spreading with the same security design. I mean, no security.
People love the internet, so they're going to put all kinds of stuff on it. Information, data, weapons, planning, personal information. They're just going to dump it on because they love it so much, and they're not going to secure it.
The internet grew quickly, opening many new doorways. But security wasn't a priority.
Because humans are humans, so first of all we think about functionality, flexibility, easy of use. Well, the government comes taxation, and then about security. The security is number last to think about.
The very foundation, the fabric that holds our society together, what makes us powerful and prosperous, also imperils us. That's our connectivity through cyberspace. And if we don't take the appropriate means, the means we know can make us more secure, then I think we have a potential catastrophe looming.
Everything is vulnerable. Being alive means you're vulnerable. If you want to be not vulnerable, you have to be dead, you have to be a rock. But, so what? Welcome to the world.
One of our greatest vulnerabilities might be right under our nose. We live in an automated world. Much of what we've come to depend on in our daily lives is controlled by industrial control systems. Little boxes called programmable logic controllers, or PLCs, are connected to bigger networks called SCADA, Systems Control and Data Acquisition. Together, they control lots of things we tend not to think about until they stop working. Behind every elevator is a PLC. Behind HVAC systems are PLCs. Behind every water treatment plant, natural gas pipeline, traffic signal, assembly plant, and even the power grid are PLCs and SCADA systems.
So SCADA systems turn valves on and off. They open and shut things. Some of these systems are decades old. They run automatically, and they sort of make our infrastructure work.
This is where it becomes very, very scary. Because, let's say you just, instead of the device opening and closing the circuit, let's say you stick it in open or you stick it in closed. Boom, you overflow the pipe bursts.
We didn't used to have to worry about this because the networks ran some funky code that was written by two guys in a basement in Maryland. What's happened is it's cheaper and faster to move those functions off the old proprietary networks onto the internet.
So, once again, in the battle between cheap and fast, or safe and secure, cheap and fast wins.
SCADA systems are less secure than most people's home network machines are. Oftentimes they have to run on older operating systems, so they have to run older types of code which cannot benefit from newer security technologies.
And in many cases, they're impossible to update. It's not like you get a new version of Windows. I mean, these things are embedded hardware, everything's hardwired, you can't make changes.
Most people's home PCs are probably better protected in a lot of cases.
SCADA systems and PLCs are at the very heart of our power grid. If an attacker could sabotage these control systems, it could have a crippling effect. But exactly how vulnerable is the grid? The Department of Homeland Security decided to perform an experiment.
It's Department of Homeland Security asked some hackers to attack an electric power generator. And using a laptop, with a little manipulation, they caused it to self-destruct.
The details are classified, but it appears that a group of hackers with no inside knowledge penetrated the security system and then took control of the generator.
The experiment stopped short of causing the generator to fly apart, but it demonstrated that it could have caused the generator to spin at such a rate. Had it been connected to the grid, it would have flown across the room and broken up into pieces.
The Aurora experiment raised the stakes, proving that in a real-world environment, weaponized code could penetrate and destroy critical infrastructure.
Attacking things like water systems, electrical grid, the phone companies, that's been part of every nation's military plans for more than 60 years now. What they have now is a new way to do it. You can do it using cyberspace. It's difficult. You can't do this at home. But if you have lots of money and people, you can overcome the obstacles. So we know there's probably a half dozen countries in the world that have developed cyber weapons and could use them in the event of a crisis.
Almost everything we have come to rely on in day-to-day life has become vulnerable. Energy, food, water, medicine are all controlled by networks which, if attacked, could fail, leaving us cold, dark, hungry, and sick.
We're at a point in time now with potential conflict. Think about how it moved in history. Armies to move over ground took weeks and months and years. Then ballistic missiles, and it was like one continent to the other in 30 minutes. Well, now one continent to the other is 30 milliseconds. 30 milliseconds.
This idea of cyber terrorism came to our minds a decade back. But we were not talking about that because it's just better to not to talk about that to media, because we didn't want have a bad guys or people which are much worse than bad guys having this idea. So that's why I was really surprised to enjoy Die Hard 4 movie. That was shock for me. Half of the movie that's just simply impossible, but half of the movie, that's possible. So I was watching the movie with a glass of whiskey, and within after 10-15 minutes I paused the movie. I had a cigarette. I said everything that I think about Hollywood. I was watching the movie for next 10, 15, 20 minutes. I pressed the pause. I had another glass of whiskey, another cigarette. So, what are you doing? You teach the bad guys. You just push them to run cyber terrorism.
In the summer of 2010, research analysts from around the globe discovered a new strain of malicious code, now called Stuxnet. Its target was unknown. Where it came from was unclear. But as they dissected it, analysts found a sophisticated, unprecedented labyrinth of code that had the potential to cause major destruction.
I was sitting here in my office and one of my engineers came to the room and he said, Eugene, we had a very big issue.
It was something new because we never see this code and we have no clue what does it mean. So we start to analyze this. You can look, this is huge file, it's maybe half megabytes. It's too much for usual malware.
Within days, analysts discovered how Stuxnet was able to sneak in and take control of a user's computer. The code used multiple zero-day attacks. These are exploits that take advantage of previously unknown vulnerabilities in the operating system. In the dark market of cybercrime, a zero-day vulnerability is worth lots of money. Occasionally, an attack will use 1 or 2 zero-day vulnerabilities. Stuxnet used at least 4. Clearly, somebody meant business.
We were very curious. It was like we are watching something which is really big, very serious, but at the same time, we are safe.
What Stuxnet is trying to do here is it's trying to disable OB35.
Meanwhile, the mystery of Stuxnet was drawing in researchers from around the globe.
We were just, wow, this file is really large and it's dense. And then it had these weird strings inside, had these weird strings about PLCs, programmable logic controllers. And then things start to get more and more interesting. You know, when you saw what the applications of PLCs were, gas pipelines, factories to build cars, uranium enrichment. Then it became much more serious.
Stuxnet was riding the rails of the internet, roaming the globe looking for PLCs to attack. And new data from Symantec was showing that the majority of targeted machines were in Iran.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has reconfirmed his commitment to continuing Iran's nuclear program. Iran does not need world powers to complete its nuclear program, he said. The crowds responded with the traditional cries of death to America, death to the UK, and death to Israel. People waved placards.
And I began to read a lot of geopolitical stories about Iran. At that time, the IAEA was meeting about Iran and their nuclear program, and every day I would wake up and read what was the latest news in Iran.
Iran has a right to peaceful nuclear power that meets the energy needs of its people. But the size and configuration of this facility is inconsistent with a peaceful program.
This is video of President Ahmadinejad visiting the underground uranium enrichment facility in Natanz in central Iran on Tuesday. There he announced that Iran has started to install 6,000 new centrifuges in the plant, in addition to the 3,000 already producing enriched uranium.
From analyzing Stuxnet's code, it was becoming clear that the attack was designed to go after an array of programmable logic controllers, PLCs. An array that matched the number of centrifuges at Natanz. Ralph Langner has been analyzing vulnerabilities in industrial control systems for more than a decade. Early on, he understood Stuxnet marked the transition from conventional weapons to cyber weapons.
The facility in Natanz
is heavily fortified by anti-aircraft missiles, and the centrifuges themselves are buried 75 feet underground. So your chance of success when using conventional explosives is probably even less than compared to a cyber weapon like Stuxnet.
So it made sense that Stuxnet was designed to attack the Iranian centrifuges in Natanz. But the question was, how did the attack work?
What I have here is the Semantic Step 7 software, which is used for programming PLCs. We're going to control this from the laptop there. So this is the cable.
Researchers set about recreating the Stuxnet attack by injecting malicious code into a programmable logic controller just like the ones used at Natanz. The result was that the code took over the controller and changed its operation.
Turn off output line 0, and we have our air pump connect to output line 0.
In the lab environment, it altered the runtime of an air pump.
Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to infect the machine.
At Natanz, it changed the rotational speed of the fuel enrichment centrifuges. One form of attack might just simply speed up the centrifuges until they exploded. But the designers of Stuxnet were more clever than that. They designed Stuxnet to first speed up and then slow down the centrifuges over time so that they would gradually fail one by one.
This attack is not designed to blow it up all at once. If you would have done that, your attack would have been detected much earlier. And what we can see in Natanz is that Iran obviously did not have a clue of what was going on for several months.
But after several months of watching their centrifuges fail, the Iranians began to understand what was happening, that they were victims of a calculated cyber attack. Several top Iranian nuclear scientists began an effort to remove the Stuxnet code from Natanz. But their work wouldn't last for long.
Assailants on motorcycles attach bombs to the cars of 2 Iranian nuclear scientists, killing one and seriously wounding the other.
An Iranian university professor has been assassinated and another injured in separate bomb attacks in the capital, Tehran.
The 2 scientists were allegedly in charge of heading up a team tasked with stopping Stuxnet.
State TV quickly blamed Israel for the attacks. At least 2 other Iranian nuclear scientists have been killed in recent years in what Iran contends is part of a covert attempt by the West to damage its nuclear program.
When I learned about the assassination of this one Iranian nuclear expert, definitely this did not make me feel very well.
Langner was one of the first analysts to calculate that the only countries that had the resources and motivation to create Stuxnet were Israel and the United States. He feared that in making public his research, he had unwittingly entered the cyber battlefield, and that he might become a target as well.
I also thought, well, if somebody probably would have had the motivation to kill me or to kidnap my kids, whatever, they would probably had done that already.
The US and Israel both deny any connection whatsoever to Stuxnet. And given the complexity of attribution, the public may never know for sure who was behind the attack.
You've talked about the importance of slowing the Iranians down. I don't want to get into the attribution of where it comes from, but given in recent days people have come out with exactly how centrifuges in Natanz have been affected by Stuxnet, has that been helpful? A simple yes or no?
I'm glad to hear they're having problems with their centrifuge machines, and I think that the U.S. and its allies are doing everything we can to try to make sure that that we complicate matters for them.
It is far beyond everything we have seen before. And what we did not expect is that Stuxnet goes up just like this. It is not based on any previous experience on the record. And this also told us that we are looking at capabilities that only a nation state has. So this is way beyond the capabilities of your average or hacker or organized crime groups.
As interesting as Stuxnet was, as challenging as Stuxnet was, and as all-consuming as it was, day and night, trying to rip it apart, I can firmly say it's something I don't ever want to see again. Single shots in history have started full-fledged wars, and I don't think we want to be at the cusp of that, beginning of that single shot, and be the ones at the beginning of some full-fledged war. I don't think we really want to take part in those types of activities.
When we think about the weaponization of code, we have to realize that we're talking not only about the initial creator, we're also talking about every other individual or group that may get its hands on that malicious software.
But people will learn from it. They'll be able to use it as a case study. How to find vulnerabilities, how to write malicious code, how to use stealth attacks and rootkits, and then how to actually get a physical response from talking to the PLC.
Stuxnet ushers in a new era. This time the attack was aimed at the fuel enrichment plant in Natanz. But what will be the next target? A manufacturing plant in China, rail transit in Europe, a medicine supplier in Canada, food distribution in South America, the power grid in the US, or our local water supply.
This is the Brighton Dam, and what you're looking at is the water source for the Patuxent water filtration plant. The reservoir has about 1 billion gallons of water in it. We use about 60 million gallons a day. If there was a hack, it could come in through a USB key. In theory, at least, somebody could put a virus on a key like they did for Stuxnet, stuff it in here, and the virus would then do something rude to the process controller. Once you get on the PLC network, you own it. You own every single one of those things on the network. Key switch or no key switch, you own it. They're meant to be fast, they're meant to be lean, they're meant to be low power. They were not meant to be secure. They were never designed with security in mind because nobody had an appropriate security model to use on them.
And these are the same PLCs that are everywhere. Traffic control, hospitals, elevators, gas pumps, sewage treatment, irrigation, food processing, and the one system that almost everything relies on, the power grid.
If you are able to take down, let's say, part of the electricity grid, pretty much everything else fails. You're not back in the 1970s pre-web. You're back in the 1870s pre-electricity. It's pretty difficult to figure out what does work under those circumstances.
I'll be blunt. If we don't have electricity, all bets are off. Give it about 6 to 12 hours and you'll be evacuating cities. It's not pretty.
The networks we rely on have shortened the distance between the attacker and the attacked. The devices that control almost every facet of our daily lives have become ticking bombs that can be used against us.
And I'm afraid that's exactly the case which is called as the opening of Pandora box. when it's open, it's not possible to close it. And I'm afraid that next we will see different types of cyber sabotage attacks. I don't know when, and I don't have any idea about their source and victim, but I'm afraid that Stuxnet was a good example for countries, governments, and anti-government organizations.
Usually what happens in the US is we don't do anything until we've been hurt, and then we overreact, and over a course of the next few years, we eventually come back to a more reasonable position. That's how the US does things. That's probably what will happen in cybersecurity. There'll be a big attack, we'll overreact, and a few years later we'll wake up and take a more pragmatic approach.
So, I think we're at the verge of a cyber weapons arms race. That we are now seeing many countries gearing up for cyber war. And I think that now, in these early years of the cyber weapons arms race, that we need to start thinking about cyber peace, about treaties, about ways that we can dampen this enthusiasm for cyber weapons. Because as we see the proliferation of non-state actors with these capabilities, we need the state actors to be able to coordinate better. Right? The sooner we can say this attack we're seeing isn't from a rival country, it's from a criminal organization, it's from a terrorist organization, it's some politically motivated attack, the sooner we can mobilize those resources against that.
So what does a post-Stuxnet world look like? Will new cyber weapons based on Stuxnet find their way into the hands of rogue states and criminal organizations? Will the world be crisscrossed with nearly constant attacks on the networks that shape our daily lives?
This truly is the cyber shot heard round the world. Somebody made a choice to do this that runs against the norm of circumspection. And if all bets are off in cyberspace, we do face the prospect of a period of perpetual disruptive warfare.